Napoleon Bonaparte was born 2.5 centuries ago to a large Corsican family that had to scrape to get by. At the age of 26, he was named head commander of the French army in Italy, and in the following years he amassed a great fortune. Napoleon has been compared to Caesar, Hannibal, and Alexander the Great. He had to work a great deal to make his way from being a poor boy to one of the greatest wartime leaders in history. In this new episode of Simple Infographics, we'll discuss the strategies that allowed Napoleon to achieve dizzying victories on the field of battle as well as in diplomacy, and why he read letters only 3 weeks after he received them. Napoleon was the second child in a family of 13. He never managed to rid himself of his Corsican accent, which was frowned upon in Paris. He wasn't popular among his classmates as a child, and he was occasionally defiant towards his teachers. But possessing an incredible memory and ambition, the young Bonaparte stubbornly studied science. He did not follow his father's example, who had changed the family's surname to Buonaparte, to hint at their relationship to a famous count's family. And after his father's death, Napoleon took on debt and cared for his mother and siblings. The family's collective memory of poverty was so ingrained that Napoleon's mother remained thrifty even after the family had amassed a great fortune. A historical anecdote has been preserved in which Napoleon asked his mother why she was so cheap. She answered that she was setting aside money in case they suddenly needed to maintain a few kings and queens. To the point, this extraordinary woman was the progenitor of an emperor, 3 kings, 3 dukes, and a prince. At 16, Napoleon graduated from the military academy in Paris with the rank of second lieutenant and entered the service. The rest of his ascent to power is a story of how he changed unfavorable circumstances to his advantage. Napoleon was so devoted to the army that he was even 2 hours late to his own wedding due to military business. His beloved Josephine was the widow of an executed aristocrat and the mother of 2 children. Almost the day after the wedding, he had to return to military affairs. His wife was slow to follow him despite his urging. Josephine was 6 years older than Napoleon and wasn't faithful to him, but she helped him to establish useful contacts in important social circles. Subsequently, Napoleon subjugated nearly all the countries of Western and Central Europe to France. His huge success was facilitated by his character, tough, cold-blooded, and pragmatic, as well as subtle techniques that helped him make the right impressions and achieve his goals. For example, Napoleon's personal bodyguards were recruited from the Guards Grenadiers, who were all 5'10" and above, that is 178 centimeters and above. At that time, the average height of a Frenchman was 5'5" or 165 centimeters. Additionally, he adored his entourage in clothes and feathers embroidered with gold, while he himself wore a simple gray frock and 3-pointed hat. By the way, the tremendous height of his guards and confusion in the conversion of French and English measurement systems gave rise to the myth that Napoleon was short. His famous nickname, the Little Corporal, still confuses many. But it had not to do with his height, but rather the age of the 26-year-old Napoleon during the Italian campaign. The corporal was actually 4 centimeters taller than average, but the French 169 centimeters translated into 157 British centimeters, leading to many caricatures. In comparison to other famous world leaders, Napoleon was 3 centimeters taller than Sir Winston Churchill and 7 centimeters taller than Admiral Nelson. In fact, he was only 6 centimeters shorter than the Duke of Wellington, who was considered very tall. One of Napoleon's talents was misleading his opponents. First, the secret intelligence services would collect the necessary information, then Napoleon would use it to make provocations and for other maneuvers. For example, Napoleon gave a very flattering characterization to an Austrian general, whom he defeated on numerous occasions, and he made sure his praise reached dignitaries in Vienna. As a result, the vaunted general was entrusted with a task with which he not only failed, but was taken prisoner in the course of doing so. And during the Egyptian campaign, he ordered his army supplies be overestimated by 1/3 in records, leading the enemy to exaggerate the size of Napoleon's host. His way of sorting incoming correspondence was also an original method of time management. Napoleon ordered his secretary to open mail only 3 weeks after it was received. But surely there could be something urgent and important, right? That's exactly why the commander let the correspondence lay low. He reasoned that most problems would solve themselves in the intervening period, and he would deal with any that hadn't. In doing this, he spared his valuable time only for the most important affairs. For comparison, today, 95% of correspondence is read within 3 minutes of reception, and answers take only 90 seconds or so. As a result, we're each drowning in a flood of unimportant matters. Of course, copying Napoleon's methods in this regard would be unreasonable today, to put it lightly. After all, important events transpiring anywhere can be written about and published throughout the world in minutes. In modern conditions, politicians can't sit idly by and wait for problems to solve themselves. And ordinary people may cause confusion or even concern for their lives and well-being if they don't respond within reasonable timeframes. Adapted for modern times, this tactic of Napoleon's teaches us to prioritize and focus on what needs to be fixed, rather than what needs merely to be improved. But all of his strategic tricks would be of little use if Napoleon didn't have an endlessly loyal army at his command. How did he manage to achieve such loyalty when he'd initially been given command over a poorly armed assembly rather than a well-oiled military machine? Officials abused their positions. There wasn't even enough money in the treasury for postage stamps. Soldiers weren't paid their salaries and some couldn't even afford shoes. In other words, the army was completely ruined. Napoleon started by executing thieves before his soldiers' eyes. Then he forbade his officers from beating the soldiers. Now, such a decree may seem unnecessary, but in those days, corporal punishment was commonplace. Slaps and punches were the norm, but Napoleon threatened to shoot his officers for engaging in such behavior regardless of their merits. His soldiers weren't merely a gray mass to their commander. He knew their faces and names. If they didn't have enough food, Napoleon would give them a cut of his own ration. One time he stayed up for 3 days straight and fell asleep with his soldiers after sharing porridge with them. Whenever his soldiers were killed outside of the field of battle, Napoleon would take cruel revenge by burning the nearest enemy village, thereby showing that the fate of each of his soldiers was important to him. At palace feasts, privates were seated interspersed with generals and other individuals of high rank. The servants were instructed to treat his soldiers with special respect. Older veterans were not simply forgotten, they were honored. Their roles were emphasized. A cult was created for them, and they were glorified in art. The result of the commander's treatment of his forces was their victorious march across Europe. Bonaparte's army defeated better equipped and more numerous opponents, made record crossings by foot, and showed miracles of endurance and a tremendous will for victory. Napoleon was able to motivate his army by showing them love and respect. Each soldier's knapsack contains a marshal's baton, he would say, underlining his belief in the potential of each of his men. Neither wealth nor noble position was a source of authority in Napoleon's army, only personal merit. Even illiterate soldiers could be promoted to officer. They were also inspired by the prospect of being promoted to the elite Imperial Guards. The Old Guard, or the Immortals, as member of these units were called, kept their formations even under heavy fire, received an increased salary, and could express dissatisfaction to Napoleon directly without punishment. To become one of them, you had to be at least 35 years old, have spent at least 10 years serving honorably in the army, gone through at least 3 military campaigns, and be at least 178 centimeters tall, as was previously mentioned. The Guards' tall bearskin caps made them appear even taller, inspiring fear in friends and enemies alike. The discipline in his army was based on Napoleon's own immense authority. Desertion was considered a crime against one's comrades, to whom one shifted one's own responsibilities by leaving. Soldiers would take and divide amongst themselves the belongings of deserters. After each battle, those who had shirked their duties were tried and were either acquitted or sentenced to be flogged by their comrades. With regard to military operations, the commander cared first of all about the numerical superiority of his army over their foes, which he would use not to surround, but to strike with all of his might in a small area. During his military campaigns, he always had the goal of delivering a powerful blow to the enemy and quickly capturing his capital, thereby ensuring a quick and total defeat. Ideally, a single decisive blow would decide the whole campaign. Second, Napoleon didn't participate in battles where the chance of victory was less than 7 in 10. And finally, he paid much attention to the formation of his soldiers, successfully using not only formations widespread in that era, but original ones as well. This gave him an immediate advantage over more formulaic and less flexible strategies of his enemies. Imagine on the one hand a line of soldiers shooting and advancing on the enemy, and on the other a quick and maneuverable force whose actions varied based on the circumstances. His artillery played a major role in important battles. It supported the army at the proper time when it was required. And the rapid movement of his forces allowed Napoleon to strike unexpectedly. But this required a high level of training for the horses and their riders as well as their coordination with the rest of the army. Toward the end of the Napoleonic era in 1812, his army numbered about 500,000 men who needed to be fed and provided with everything they needed during campaigns. Napoleon solved this issue rationally as always. He allowed his soldiers to steal or buy food from the local population. Thanks to these actions, the commander instilled strong and faithful support for himself among his troops, which forever inscribed his name in military history. As you can see, Napoleon's success was not the result of circumstance nor luck. He carefully gathered success by meticulously thinking his strategy over and personally participating in battles. Which of Napoleon's tactics do you think is most worthy of imitation? Perhaps you know of other tactics of his. Share in the comments. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Press the bell to get notifications when our new videos come out. Bring your friends, and until next time.